Good morning. I wanted to jump on and share a little bit about my morning because I think it might be helpful for many of us to think about. I just got back from dropping my 12-year-old off at band camp, and he's reading a book called Positive Intelligence, which is based on a class that I teach, created by Shirzad Shamin, and I'm a positive intelligence coach. And so I gave him this book to read. And fortunately, it was a great thing that I did, because one of the ways that Shirzad talks about the inner critic and our judge and all of these things that I talk about is we talk about it as our inner saboteurs. And so Jaden is now familiar with that language, and he happened to be in a really shitty mood this morning because he didn't want to go to band camp. And I got in a shitty mood too, because that's what happens. Saboteurs talk to other saboteurs and it gets contagious. And I had been explaining to him earlier in the morning before he got in this, really crappy place, how oftentimes I will shield my energy when I'm trying to create something in my life. I'm trying to, stay in a place that's going to draw the things that I want to have drawn to me and keep me out of the potholes in our minds that keep all of those things at bay. I will often pay a lot of attention to I always am paying a lot of attention to what are my thoughts, what are my actions, what are my feelings. And not that I'm denying anything negative, but just being in observance of them and not giving too much weight to them. And when people are around me and they're in a very negative space, and I'm aware because I've been thinking about it, that I don't want to be dragged into a negative space, I will often just kindly extract myself or not participate in that conversation or do what I need to do to protect the energy around myself so that I can maintain the state of mind that I need to be in to get through my day with more of a positive mind than stress or anxiety or fear or guilt or shame or anger or any of those things. And so we're driving to band camp, and Jaden is, and I can feel his energy. And I just said to him, because he's reading this book, I can use this language with him that he understands. And I said, my saboteurs are engaged right now, meaning I'm feeling all kinds of negative feelings. I'm feeling irritated. I'm feeling all of these things. And I can tell that your saboteurs are engaged, meaning he was, irritated with going to this camp. He was upset, all these things. And I said, I have too much going on in my day to day and in my life right now that I'm trying to cultivate, that I can't engage my saboteurs. And that means that my saboteurs can't talk to your saboteurs right now. So I need to be quiet for a few moments to try and move myself out of my energy, because I can't have saboteur to saboteur discussion right now. And fortunately, he understands that language. And so we both stopped and just were quiet. And then he eventually took a deep breath and he said, okay, now tell me what the electives are that this camp is doing again this week. I don't understand, because he was getting all worked up about that there were electives or whatever. I don't know, but it felt more like school than camp to him, yada, yada. Anyway, after I dropped him off, something interesting happened. I was hit with a wave, just like an overwhelming wave of grief that I don't often experience as it relates to Jaden's disability. Jaden has a degenerative neuromuscular disorder. And when I dropped him off, he didn't have a backpack, so he was holding his saxophone, which is pretty heavy, and he had his pencil, and he had his lunch. It was the first day of camp. We didn't really know, what to expect. And he's trying to gather all of these things, and the guy's giving him, a name tag, and he's got his water, and he doesn't have enough balance to hold a lot of things, because he really sort of needs his upper part of his body to help him balance when he's walking. And so that's probably something that tipped it off. But regardless, I got in the car, and I think because I had really settled all of the negative feelings down around my saboteurs that were just getting irritated with him and, all these things. And because I work on that, and I did a meditation this morning and all that stuff, what was able to come up was this really, really genuine, just overwhelming wave of grief of how unfair it is that Jaden has to have this disability, and how much more difficult his life is than than mine, quite frankly, and many other kids his age. And I just released that, and while it was not comfortable and it's not something that I really, I don't love to be there, but I recognize that that's got to come out too, right? Like, I know all of the beautiful things about Jaden's soul and why he's here. And I have so much gratitude for all of the things that his soul is going to create on this earth. And I have clarity around the reasons why he had to have this disability and why I had to birth a child with a disability. And that's all great. That's all fantastic. But it doesn't mean that in the real life human experience, I don't also experience deep, deep sadness and grief at watching him struggle, or going to the beach last night and him falling down while the other two kids, and my husband and I are just walking down to the water, like, this is tough. And it's a balance. So when we talk about, people talk about thinking positively and all of that stuff. And I know that I talk a lot about that. I talk a lot about getting your mind right. And I mean it. It's absolutely imperative. But do not mistake that for when there is genuine grief, when there is something that the human condition is genuinely sad about. That has to be expressed, because if it's not, and if it's never experienced, you're just in this place of spiritual numbing. And that's something that I could do a whole nother video on, because I see many, many people just in this spiritual numbing place, like, oh, everything's great, and oh, and I'm going to eat berries and live off of wood chips, and oh, it's just fantastic. No, that's not the goal. That's not where we're going. Certainly not what I'm about. I'm about boots on the ground, real life experience. Yes, is taking care of your emotional state the number one? Is serenity your only emergency? The most important emergency? Yes, it is. It is. It is. It is. Your serenity is the most important thing, because when you get that right, you can see the world differently, and you see your life differently, and you see yourself differently, and everything else follows from there. But when you are sad, when you are in grief, when there's something to be genuinely sad about, you have to experience that too. And that too is taking care of your emotional world. Now, if I took to my bed for the rest of the day in a state of victimhood or a state of guilt that Jaden is experiencing this because I birthed him, no, that's not the same thing. But if I spend some time just crying and just grieving and just allowing myself to feel the authentic sadness that comes with grief, that's different. That is taking care of your emotional state. And does it mean that I'm vibrating at a high frequency in that moment to draw all the fabulous things to me? No, not in that moment. But I'm not in a great vibrant frequency either, because it's genuine sadness. I want you to get this. Do you understand the difference between being in a place of victimhood, shame, guilt, anger, versus pure sadness? And when you can work through the pure sadness that's underneath all the layers of shit that we put on top of it, irritation, anger, shame, victimization, guilt, all of that shit is covering up what's really going on inside. When you can authentically release that, you're going to release so many other of those emotions that are moving you around. So I hope you hung with me for this whole video, and please let me know if it was helpful for you. And I hope you are having a beautiful day that is synchronized perfectly with your energy, whatever that authentic essence energy of you is today.